had a generic floor assembly in there. So once you get to the level where you're actually putting in beams and that type of thing,
Maybe it's the axe.
start to model the actual
Concrete
floor.
What do you say?
And start
Maybe carpenter did it, like it's cool.
Unless you have really crappy tools.
That makes sense. And sometimes people will create like a floor assembly that includes the structure in it.
Oh, like we did with the wall?
Yeah, because you might have like some people put like a 16-inch joist layer in there, and all it does is make a big void, and then people would fill that in with your joists and other structure. The problem with that is we're not doing, that would be residential construction. You would actually have a ceiling underneath structure right up to it. Whereas in a building like this, you're really going to have your slab system, then you're going to have a beam system, and then somewhere down here you're going to have a ceiling because you're going to have like 36-inch deep mechanical ducts, running through that space somewhere. And so your ceiling is going to be its own separate assembly. And actually, guys, today I'm going to go over, I feel like at the end of last class, we kind of got to the end and I rushed on the railings, of making up railings. I don't know if you guys have mastered working with railings yet. I was going to go over that task one more time and I kind of just show you guys some other methods of what we could do with railings. And then I want to talk about ceiling assemblies because we have gone over our floor assemblies in a little bit of detail, and then also a little bit of roof assemblies, but I'm also going to get into more detail on the roofs as well. But I want to concentrate on railings and then ceiling assemblies so that we can start, starting to put that type of information into our models. I started looking at your hotels. They're all looking pretty good, I think, so especially with the stage of the type of information that we've gone over so far. So, I just want you guys to, the point of the hotel project is essentially you're learning the tools that goes into actually making a building, and we're using as many of the different tools as we can within Revit. You guys have, kind of the design base of, working with that conceptual mass and doing complex forms. And I just want you guys to, start to show as much of your skill set as possible while you're working on your design. I'm not looking for the magic solution, or if you guys decide that you need more than one room type or two room types, there's two in the program, but let's say you decide you want to have a third type or a different configuration, you're welcome to explore whatever you need to in order to show that you can implement the skills that we've gone over in class. And that's really all I'm looking for in the final design, and it's going to be something that we're going to be able to document in a somewhat of a construction document type of form. And I haven't decided exactly how far we're going to go with that document yet, but I basically, we're going to want some presentation quality renderings of the hotel, and then we're also going to want to have some other drawing types that would show sections and floor plans and that type of thing. But for right now, let's go ahead and open up Revit, and let's just start with a new project, or you can model off to the side if you want of your particular hotel, but I'm going to start a new project just to work in that environment, because we're just going to look at a little bit more on the railings where we ended up at the last class.
You get walls around your elevator shaft.
Just draw them?
But do you have to do it on every floor? You can just create walls.
You could create a wall that has a base at the level 1, and then tell it to have its top at however far you need to go, just like you did with the shaft. So whatever you did with the shaft, you can do the same with the wall. You could do it on every floor, but that.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
I mean, is that way to do the best way to do elevator shafts, and then just put a door in each?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I've got a new project open, and what I want to do is go over how we can customize our own railing. I kind of quickly went over modifying some profiles and then looking at the balusters and just kind of throwing it together. And then we also looked at louver system. I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit, slow down on those steps so that we fully understand the railings. One thing with modeling, just whether you're in Revit or any other 3D program, what really makes your model, especially when you get into renderings and getting into presentation views, is having that particular set of real details kind of put into the model, whether it's how you apply your textures and your materials, but it's also the details of, you're actually showing guardrails that are at the appropriate scale, 3 foot 6 inches above a floor, and you're also showing the tectonic structure of that rail, so you're looking at the horizontal railings or the vertical posts or whatever the design might be. Adding that level of detail into your model, whatever view you look at, is really going to make that a very nice presentation rendering, or just as far as studio is concerned, is going to be something that looks very believable. And adding in railings, to me, is probably the easiest way to give your project a scale without having to add in a person, adding in a Photoshop person. Or it also helps you when you're trying to add in a Photoshop person to properly scale that image, because that your railing is pretty much always half of your body, or close to half of your body height. So it helps really allow your projects to read when you're looking at it in any different view. So that's why I kind of want to focus on this a little bit more, is because railings are important, and it's also one of the probably more complicated tools that are available with Revit. Walls and floors and all of these other tools are kind of, to some extent, self-explanatory once you understand how they work. But railings have a lot of different parts and pieces of how we can work with them. What I would like to do is create a railing that, I'm going to load this other project up real quick. Just want to create a railing system that has a little bit of character to it, something that you might, instead of just having a straight up and down post and you've got your horizontal rails, but someone last class asked if there's a way to actually angle your posts, and then how do you work with that. It's actually quite simple. We just need to think about, again, looking at what this looks like in section. And if you were to cut a section through your railing, it's what type of profiles do you need in order to create this particular railing system. And I'm just going to look at basically two profile types. The first is going to be a rectangular bar stock, something that we can put together and weld together to this vertical post that has some kind of shape to it. And this particular post also has a couple of parameters to it that we could also later on customize exactly how far out it kind of bulges out to the right, and how far up this kink actually happens. And then looking at the rectangular piece, that's something, the rectangular piece is already kind of built into the project environment as you start up Revit. So that will be kind of an easy customization that I think we should start with. And again, I need to go back to my project. So we're on our blank project board. If you look at the project browser and expand the families section down at the very bottom, what we're looking at when we start dealing with any kind of sketch-based tool that's going to extrude along a path is we're looking for a profile that we can edit or add in order to make these railings or any kind of other elements happen. And if you expand profiles, you'll see a lot of different shapes that are already preloaded or come with Revit. And one of them is called rectangular handrail, and there's also a circular one, but rectangular handrail is already there. And if you expand that, you'll also see that there's only two types. There's a 2 inch by 2 inch and a 2 inch by 3 inch, which are really big bulky kind of railing systems. You know, typically if you're going to be dealing with a lot of bar stock or any kind of you know, architectural tectonics that we really want to get a kind of a slim rail, you know, we're not going to be using these big bulky shapes. But the rectangular handrail already has a set of parameters set to it, this particular profile, and we really don't need to go into the family environment to start to work with this particular family. If you click on the rectangular handrail and then right click on it, you can see that there is the ability to hit edit straight from this project browser. If you click on edit, that will take you into the family environment. I'm also going to go back, I'm flipping back into that project. But we could also, well, we could do this in two ways. We could click edit and that would open this particular shape up in the family environment. And you'll notice that you don't really see any of the parameters or the dimensions. Pretty much every family that comes with Revit, when you open it up, it doesn't show you the construction of this particular shape. If I click on VG and then annotation categories, they always turn off the reference planes and the dimensions for any of the default you know, family types that actually come with Revit. So if we open or turn those on and hit OK, you can then see the parameters and how this particular component was built. You could also look at the family types up at the left, and you see that there are two parameters. There's a height and a width that are available to change and manipulate. So you could come in here and add in whatever shapes you want, you know, with the new family types and changing the parameters and hit OK. And then, you know, reload this into the project. That'd be one way to edit this. But I'm going to close this for now. But we could also do this straight in the project environment. So instead of clicking on rectangular handrail, right-clicking and clicking on edit, if you just click on one of these other items underneath it, under the when you expanded the window, the 2" by 2" for instance, we could right-click on that and say duplicate. And of course, it'll give you a 2" by 2", and then it'll put a number 2 after it because it wants to still keep the same name, but we have to have unique names, so it'll always add a number after it. But I might change this now to say something like, let's call it a 1/2 inch by 3 inch. And that will change the name, and it also added, you know, that particular shape underneath the rectangular handrail. The only issue is we didn't edit any of the properties. All we did was change a name. So now that we have that duplicated and we have a new name, we could right-click on our new name, and then you can click on Type Properties, and that brings you into where you can actually edit the parameters that are already set for this particular profile. So then I can change my height will be 1/2 inch, and then my width will be 3 inches. And then we can hit apply, and that now applies those parameters to that new name that we just created, or that new parameter type, new family type. So that'll be good. And then what I want to do is duplicate this one more time, the same one that we just created. I'm going to duplicate that one, and this time I'll do a 1/2 inch by, let's call it, let's do 6 inches. And then again, type properties, and then change the width from 3 inches to 6 inches, and hit apply, and then OK. So because we don't really need to open up the family environment, because this is already loaded, we can do a lot of edits right here, and we can save ourselves a little bit of time, especially if it's something as simple as just making a rectangle. You know, we don't have to make our own. There's already one ready to go. The next part, though, is I need to customize a baluster or a post that we can use that has that particular angled shape that you saw in that section view. And so in order to do this, we will need to actually make a custom baluster. And I'm going to go under User Interface, the Recent Files, and under Families, we're going to create a new, and then select Baluster Post. We can open that up. And I really only need the, you can see there's a default kind of view here that has a couple different reference planes, and then it says baluster post elevation up here. It also has a baluster height that's already set. This baluster height is a default that eventually gets changed depending on the parameters that you set in the railing dialog box back in the project environment. So we can keep this at a particular height. This other one that's up here at the top, even though it says top of post, this other one is also the top. It's kind of confusing at the moment, and I'm not going to get into the difference of these two at the moment, but I'm going to delete the one that says top of post and just keep the one where it says baluster height. The next part is under family types. Because I know that our guardrail systems are always going to be 42 inches minimum, 3 foot 6 inches, let's go ahead and make our baluster height that as well, so that we're modeling to at least, you know, some kind of scale that we're actually going to apply this particular baluster or this post in the real world environment. Before I continue, I'm going to hit do a save as family, and let's give this a name like baluster post, and then maybe I'll just call it kinked. The next part, I want to be in the elevation. I want to expand my project browser. And for some reason, you always start off in the left view. And if we're doing something that's going to look at kind of the section of this baluster, we always need to be in the front view. I don't know why that is. I would kind of assume left and right. But as long as you're in the front view, this is what you're going to see when you cut a section looking at this post. The next part is I'm going to draw, under home, I'm going to draw two reference planes. So if you click on home and reference plane, I'm going to draw one horizontal and one vertical. And the vertical one was off to the left of that vertical that's already established, and the horizontal was above the reference level. I'm going to add two dimensions, one from the floor to that horizontal, and then from the vertical to the vertical. Let's go ahead and set the one that's vertical to something like 8 inches, and the one that is horizontal to be, let's do 1 foot off of the floor. The next part, just because we may want to edit where those two dimensions occur eventually, we might want to change our post around. Let's add a couple parameters.
Jeremy, I keep clicking to my dimension. I can't change it.
You have to click the line, the reference plane, and then you can select. So I'm going to add a parameter, and this one I'll call, let's call it kink offset. Horizontal probably makes sense. Kink offset horizontal. Keep it as a type parameter. Remember, because we are selecting from a pull-down menu eventually in our railing dialog box, all of our families have to have type parameters so that they can be set by a particular naming convention of our family type. That'll make a little more sense in a little bit. And I'm going to group this under other instead of dimensions, just so I separate it from what's already established as a default. The next one's going to be kink offset vertical. And again, I'll group this under other. And then go ahead and set each of these. I guess this would be our kink offset horizontal, would be our horizontal distance, and this one would be our vertical. Kind of makes sense, I guess. All right, So the next part is we need to draw an extrusion because balusters are actually 3D elements. Railings are actual just 2D profiles. The reason for that is a railing is a particular profile that's going to be extruded along the path. So it's going to be this horizontal rail, and therefore it needs to be a 2D element. A baluster is a 3D component because it's something that gets repeated every so often. So it'll be like 4 feet on center or 5 feet on center or something like that. So it's actually an object that's being placed. So under Home, you'll see that we have 3D modeling tools that are available. And I'm going to click on Extrusion, and you'll get a dialog box asking you what the work plane should be. If we're in the front view, let's choose reference plane center front back and then hit OK. And now we can actually draw in this view. I'm going to draw a line snapping to the intersection of the original vertical and horizontal lines, reference planes. And then I'm going to draw another one snapping to the new intersections of those offset reference planes, and then draw a line snapping to the intersection back up at the top. So you should get this angled line that looks something like this. Now we can't end this sketch because it needs to have a thickness and be a closed shape. So I'm going to also make this a 3-inch offset and make sure you have copy. And I'm going to copy towards the interior, I guess in this view towards the right, and offset both of those lines just like that. The final step will be to close the shape. I actually want to pick lines, and I'm going to pick and lock my lines to the reference planes that are at the top and the bottom, and then use the trim and extend, and I forgot to lock the bottom. So since I forgot to lock the bottom, I can tab over and do an align. Fatal error. What?
Sounds pretty fatal.
Why would that even happen? Yes, I'll send a report. Alright, I gotta catch back up. Anyone else get a fatal error? This is my teaching computer. Alright. I guess everyone else can catch up. If you want to continue, I was going to make that extrusion 3/8 inch offset towards the front and the back. So if you guys know how to do that, you can figure that out while I'm loading back up here. So luckily I did a lot of saving as we were going. One reason to save quite a bit. So all I have to do is redo this extrusion and we're good to go. Let's see. And this time I'll remember to lock it so I don't align it and cause some kind of problem. Then I'm going to use the trim and extend, and we're going to close these shapes up on the top and the bottom. And one last thing that I want to do is create a dimension for that particular offset. So right now we did a 3-inch and a 3-inch. Later on I might want to change that if I decide that that looks too bulky. And the other part is I also want it to always be that dimension no matter how far this ends up kinking out or moving up. if we don't lock this dimension and or give it a parameter, what will start to happen is if you move this reference line, if you start to change the kink offsets, let's say it moves further out, these lines will not know where to move to, and they'll stay, they'll kind of start to stretch, but they won't be parallel anymore. So I'm basically forcing a constraint to always keep this a 3-inch offset. And I can do this a couple different ways. If I know that I never want to change this, I could select the dimensions and then lock it. Sometimes you have to zoom out to find that. Or I might give it a parameter and just call it, something like post depth, and group it under other. And then I can make that, 3 inches within there, and then assign those parameters. So now I can end that sketch, and when I'm done, it'll still remain selected, and over to the left you'll see extrusion end and extrusion start. This is where I was saying that I'm going to make this post 3/4 inch thick. So we want it to extrude about the center line. I'm going to do point. If you don't have this on your screen, you have to select your post. You need to select that to get your extrusion start and end. And you need to exit your sketch. And I'm going to change the extrusion end to 0.375, that's 3/8 inch, that's half a 3/4. And then the extrusion start would be negative 3/8. So I look at it in 3D, I've got a kind of this boomerang looking thing. And then what we want to do is look at our view again, and we want to test that this form works when things get stretched and changed in different configurations. So we want to load up our family types. And the first thing I'm going to do is test the baluster height. Maybe I'll change it to 2 foot and hit apply. And I see that my form changed. So then I can change that back to 3'6". Next thing I can do is change, some of these where the kink occurs. I can see how it's moving up and down and out. I should also be able to change my post depth. So you need to test all those parameters out, because otherwise when you bring it in to your file to actually work on the railing, it's not going to work. So I'm going to put all my parameters back to how they were. Oh, well, 1 inch. Might help if it's 1 foot. So did everyone test out their post and it works and it moves and changes configuration? Next thing we want to do is under family types, we want to give this a name. So let's, since we have those parameters set, click on family types and new, and let's call this, maybe I'll call this 8-inch out by 12 inches up. Just so I kind of understand where the kink is going to occur on this particular post. Because we could have a number of different family types that has this post in different configurations. But we just need that one for right now. And let's go ahead and save. And I need to open up a project because I crashed. So hold on. And then what we want to do is load this baluster into our project file. I've got to redo all my railings. Hold on, I have to make my rectangles again. Okay, before I continue, I'm going to save this file. Okay, so now we can start with a template. Remember in Revit that you always start with some particular object that's already there, and then we edit that type and customize it to what we want. And if I'm looking at a level 1 floor plan, let's go ahead and click on railing. And I'm going to choose from the properties, let's choose guardrail pipe. Then let's draw a line and exit out of that, and then draw a section. Whenever we're working on a guardrail and we're customizing it, we want to look at it in section because that's how we need to draw it. So if I cut the section, draw a section by going to view and then section marker, and you're basically drawing a line like you're going to cut. And as soon as you do that, it will automatically give you a section in your project browser. Okay, so now you have a section where we're looking at this post. I'm also going to turn off my line weights because that's kind of annoying. Now if we look at this in 3D, it's a railing system that has horizontal rails, which are very similar to what we want to do. We want to have horizontal bar stock. It has this extra railing that's kind of floating out there as a handrail, and then it's got some posts that are occurring every so often. What I want to do is take this as my starting point and then edit this particular railing to a new shape. So right now, let's just make sure, first thing, in level 1, when I drew this line, I drew it horizontal, and then I did a vertical section that's looking towards the right. We all want to be looking at it in the same way, otherwise when we start to customize it, you guys are probably going to have opposite numbers that are going to show up. Okay, so looking at it in section, you guys need to have a railing guardrail pipe as your railing type. Everyone have that?
No.
Click on it. There you go. And then once we click on this, we can click on Edit Type at the top left. And because we're editing something that already came with Revit, I want to duplicate this and customize it to give it its own name. So I'm going to call this guardrail bar stock kinked post. That I think will describe this handrail or guardrail system. Now click on OK.
Did you duplicate that first, or did you?
Yeah, just once you click on the railing, click on Edit Type, and then duplicate. Now what we can do is start to edit the structure of this. You'll see that this had a baluster offset of like -1 inch. Let's just zero this out so that we're not dealing with something that doesn't need to be that way. We can hit apply. Next thing I'm going to do is we're going to look at the baluster shape. So we need to add in our new profile that we just created. So under baluster placement, click the edit button. You get this dialog box that doesn't resize, which is kind of annoying because you can have some pretty long baluster names and you have to try to find them in this little window. You can stretch these columns back and forth if you can't read something, but I can't stretch this window any further, the overall window. But what I want to do is under baluster family, if you click on the name baluster round 1 inch, go ahead and click on that. You'll get a down arrow. And then you can scroll down and you should be able to find your baluster post kinked 8-inch out times 12-inch up. Now if you had other family types that describe that post, let's say you had different kinked configurations and you had more family types associated with that baluster post, you would have more options here in that menu. So that's why they have to be tight parameters, because you're basically making that into a pull-down menu that you can select at a later time. So I'm going to make sure that all of these, including the ones on the bottom, are set to that new post type. And I'll click on, let's also justify it. You can see at the underneath the main pattern. This is the main pattern of the baluster family, basically where all the posts are going to occur. You can create a justification of how these posts get laid out by the beginning. That would be from the starting point of the line that you drew, the end, center, or spread the pattern to fit. Let's just choose center for now. And we'll just keep everything else like that. We'll hit apply and then OK. And then if we hit apply again and OK and exit out, we should update our, a lot of sunlight there, update our railing system so it looks like this. We now changed out the post, but we still have the railing that's going horizontal. If we look at it in 3D, you should have your boomerang looking post kind of shown equally spaced along that path. So now back to the section. We've got to figure out a couple things. We need to place our bar stock in the horizontal manner, and then we also need to figure out how to get it to fit this form that we've created. So again, we need to look at this in section to figure all this out. The first thing I'm going to do is we're going to switch out all of these posts or these railings to the profiles that we want. And we're also going to add a couple, because I'll show you in a minute that this isn't a correct guardrail. I need to select the guardrail again, and then I can click on Edit Type, and I get back into this dialog box. I think I'll need trusty magnifier. And now we can click on rail structure and then edit. And you should get your dialog box that looks like this. Now you'll notice that these were the placement of where all the rails occurred. And they're measured to the top of that rail. So they had the circular handrail 1-inch profiles set at 6 inches, 11 inches, 1'4", and so on, as you move from the ground up. It doesn't matter what order they're in. What's dictating, where those railings occur, it happens to be the height that's set in this box. If I moved rail 9 up to here, it's still going to be 6 inches above the ground. You do want to probably have them in some sequential order, though, just for your knowledge, so that you don't get a headache trying to edit your handrail systems, or somebody else can actually figure out what you're doing as well. You also see that there's an offset. This is the offset from the center. Basically when you draw a railing, it's assuming that the railing profile is going to be centered on the post, if the post was straight up and down. And so this is saying that this railing right now, the way that this one was set up, is that it's being offset -1 inches. And then you see there's this rail number 3 that's offset 2 inches. That's because there's that handrail that was sticking out of this original post, and that's how they got that one to stick out further than the rest. First thing I want to do is let's zero all these offsets out. And then I'm going to change the rail number 1. If you click on the profile and that down arrow, you should be able to select and see those additional rectangular handrails that we made. And rail number 1 is going to be 1/2 inch by 6 inches. And then go ahead and select 1/2 inch by 3 inch for all the rest. It'd be nice if you could kind of do a shift select, but you can't. The next thing is I've got a rail that's up at 3 foot 6 inches. That's correct for a guardrail system, but I don't know why they don't just have this as a default already in Revit. I guess they want you to do some research, but you really can only have 4 inches separating your any kind of element on a guardrail system, because you can't have a 4-inch sphere pass through the guardrail. And so you can see right now they've got a 3 foot 6 and then it goes to 3 foot. We need to change these heights to be 4 feet apart. So I'm going to just change rail number 2 to be 3 foot 2. Rail number 3 would be 2 foot 10. Rail 4 would be 2 foot 6. And rail number 5 happens to be right. Then I'll go to rail 6 is 1 foot 10. I'm just subtracting 4 on each of these. 1 foot 6. 1 foot 2, 10 inches, and I see I need another rail or 2, actually 2 more rails in order to make this work out. So what I'm going to do is, since I've already got this rail number 9 right here, and I've set it to 10 inches, and it's set to rectangular handrail 1/2 inch by 3 inch, I'm going to click on duplicate 2 times. And I'm going to move these guys down so I can click on the numbers and just use the down button. And I'll change one of these to say rail 10, just so I'm consistent with the numberings. And the next one, rail 11. Then I can continue my 4-inch countdown. Next one will be 6 inches and then 2 inches. Hit apply and OK, and apply and OK. And I'm going to look at my railing system now. You can see I've got it where I've got all the profiles directly lined up, and now we have to figure out how far do we have to offset all of these. Well, this is where we need to start to sketch a little bit within Revit. I do a lot of sketching with annotation and detail lines, because these are just lines that are particular to this view, and they're something that we can easily erase later, and they don't affect anything in the model. Annotation lines are like drawing on a piece of paper over this particular model or this drawing. We're just drawing kind of these drafted pencil lines. I'm going to change my line style to be set to lines, so I get that green line. And then I'm going to use the pick lines, and I'm going to pick the shape of my boomerang, and I'm going to click on offset, and let's offset this towards the center, 1.5 inches. And I can uncheck the copy. I don't need to really copy this, but you could keep it if you want. And I'm just going to offset those lines towards the center so I can find the center point or the center line of this boomerang section that we've got. The next thing is we're going to draw the same lines again, and this time I'm going to draw from the midpoint of one of these horizontal rails. And I'm just going to draw a horizontal line. I just need something to reference and be able to snap to.
Wait, where'd you do that?
I'm just drawing a horizontal line from the midpoint of the bar,
Another
horizontal
detail
bar.
line?
Detail lines, annotate detail line. Then I'm going to take that same line and let's copy multiple. And we can just copy this so that we're down on every single one of these, or you could do an array, 4 inches on center. Just typical, AutoCAD drafting right now. So you should have kind of a sketch that looks like this on the screen. And I'm going to draw one more line, a vertical line that connects the center line of all of those elements. From time to time, instead of doing math in our head, just use the drawing tools so that we can figure this out. We did this in computational practice this morning. We had to figure out a pitch of a roof that was 33 degrees, and you can figure that out by just, doing some sketching. But now that I have this, what I want to do is actually look at this and strike some dimensions so that I can see them on screen, so that when I bring up the dialog box for the railing command, I have all the information on screen that I can just translate into this dialog box. First thing I'm going to do is I'm at 1/8 inch scale in this section. That's going to make our numbers really, really big. Let's change our scale to something like you would normally see a railing section at, which would be like 1/2 inch equals a foot. And then I can draw a dimension, align dimensions. And watch what I'm doing here. I'm going to strike a dimension from the vertical and then hover over until you can select the point of the intersection of the angled center line and that horizontal. And then I'm going to kind of move this up a little bit. Now look at that dimension, 17 and 32 seconds or whatever you might have. That's kind of an annoying dimension to me. I would like this to actually round to a 1/8 inch. So we need and I also want to get rid of the zeros that I'm showing you. So we need to start to understand how we also edit dimension styles, which is going to be key when we get into construction documents. Does everyone have a dimension to edit? Okay. Click on your dimension, and you'll see that dimension styles, or your dimensions that you work on, have a pull-down menu just like all of your other elements. So I could pick all these other different dimension styles if I wanted to. But what I would like to do is edit the type, and we're going to duplicate this and call it, keep the same name, delete the 2, and then just call it round 1/8 inch. Now you're in this dialog box, you have all of these parameters that are set to a dimension string. I can change my tick mark. Right now it's set to 1/8 inch. I could change it to something else if I don't like what that looks like. We can add in additional tick marks later on. I'm not going to get into that whole lot. We can also change the line weight of the lines, the line weight of the tick mark. But if I scroll down all the way at the bottom, there's a units format. And right now it's set to default, which is our project default at the moment. And there's a button. Go ahead and click it, you get a dialog box, and it's set to use the project settings. If we uncheck that, we can now change the rounding. I'm going to round this to 1/8 inch. And I'm also going to select suppress 0 foot. So I know I'm going to be in inches when I'm sitting here dimensioning all of the, these different offsets that we need to do, and I don't need to see 0 foot and then whatever the inches are. That's just too much verbiage on a dimension string for this particular case. So everyone got that? And then I'm going to hit OK, and then we can hit OK again. Then you see that our dimension now changed to something a little bit better to work with. We can type in, I've got 1/2 inch on this case. So let's draw a dimension to all of these. And you'll see that I drew another one and I've got this 1/16 inch dimension. That's because I wasn't paying attention. And when I use my align dimension, it remembers the last dimension style that you actually drew with. We could actually now change to our new one called linear 3/32 aerial round 1/8 inch. And now we can start drawing all of these dimension strings. So we need to do a dimension for every one of these bars. You guys should all have numbers similar to mine, but if you don't, that's okay. You can, because you changed your tick mark probably. So if you click on your dimension style and then click on edit type under tick mark, this one set to diagonal ½ inch. You might have had it set to like dot filled or something. Okay, everyone have your numbers? So now this gives us our dimension of how we need to offset all of these different bars in order to fit our shape. So now I can click on the rail and edit the type and load up my rail structure. Of course, everything's blue. Well, I'm going to keep everything white, so I'm going to click on Home or Family Types. I'm in my project browser, and I'm expanding railings, and then I can right-click under Baluster Post Kinked. Railing systems. Where are you at? There we go. Under railings and then railing, I can now pick my guardrail box stocked or bar stock kinked, right click on it, and then choose the type properties. I went that method so that when I selected my railing system, all of my selections still remained blue, and it was hard to read the dimensions and all that. So now I'm in my edit rails, and now we can change, moving from top to bottom, what our offset needs to be. Our top rail is that one that's at the very top, and you can see it's kind of slightly off of our boomerang. I'm going to first test our direction of what we're doing if I put in a positive or a negative number. I want to know which way is going to move the offset. Is positive going to be to the right or negative going to be to the left? I don't know. So let me type in negative 1 inch at the top here and hit apply, OK, and apply. And I see that my top rail moved to the right. So now that I know when I'm looking at this section, anytime I type in a negative number, it's going to move to the right. If I type in a positive number, it's going to move to the left. So you need to test out one of these offsets as you proceed. So I'm going to go back now, and I'm going to change this to be a positive offset 1 inch. That looks better. And now we can look at what side is our dimension occurring from that center line that we drew. If I go to rail 2, that one is on the left of our center line, so I'm going to type in a positive ½ inch. The next one is on the other side of the center line, so it's going to be negative ½ inch. It looks like I've got a lot of negatives after this, so I just keep going down the line. Negative 1 5/8, negative 2.75. Next one is negative 3.75. Negative 4.875. Negative 6 inches. negative 4.75, negative 2, and the last one is negative 5/8. Nope, my last one is positive 5/8. So if you've modeled everything like I have, you should have these numbers. And I can expand it, so if you need to get, well, that's all of them. So now we can exit out of that, and now no matter what we do with this rail system, if I look at it in 3D, I've got my bar stock and everything modeled correctly. I can go back into a floor plan view, and now that I've set all that up, it was a lot of work to set up that system, but now I can draw this wherever I want. So I can click on home, I can draw another railing, and if I make sure I choose my guardrail bar stock kinked, I can start to draw, you know, curved. Whatever the shapes might be. And when I look at it in 3D, I have my guardrail maneuvering around how it needs to.
Jeremy, can you, when you're drawing railings like in a plan view, can you not pick lines, like to pick the edge of floor plates? How do you do that?
Yeah, so let's say, you know, right now you guys have really been working with your floors. You have floor openings. You have all these different, you know, you might even have stairs that are actually drawn. So if I'm going to draw a floor real quick, and I'll just do like a big rectangle with some kind of opening in the center. Actually, that's kind of a drastic angle there, so maybe it needs to be like this. So if you actually have a floor plate, you know, that looks like whatever shape it might be. I've got a floor that's in 3D. I'm looking at it, I've got a hole. When you look at it in plan view and you click on home and railing, you can just use the pick lines, and we can actually make sure I select my guardrail. Let's say I want it on the inside of this, go ahead and pick. And I can look at it in 3D and make sure, you know, it's kinked in the right direction. If I wanted to, I could look at it at the level, and I could, you'll get these flip handles. If I click on the flip handles, it'll flip the way that your railing system goes in or out.
You can only do them in straight lines, maybe?
You have to be,
I couldn't do it on any of my floor plans.
yeah, so if your floor plan is circular or has some kind of,
So we'll do it on these end lines.
let's say it has a bump like this. That's kind of the little, you can also click on railing and pick lines. Of course, I didn't pick the right one, so change it. And you can modify, you get the flip handles also in 3D. Use the tab key. How are those, you may have to, on your floor plate, because our floor plates were generated by a mast that might have a curved face to it, you know, some kind of curving happening, you may have to click on your floor plate. And as long as you're not going to edit your mass anymore, you're satisfied with the actual design of your exterior volumetric shaping, you can click on edit boundary of your floor. Are you able to click on that? Click on your floor, got it selected. And then you could edit the shape of your floor. Just left click on your floor assembly. You don't want your glasses on. That's all. So now you can edit the boundary. And if you actually redraw this line with one of these tools, so now that you know that this is the shape it's going to be, let's go ahead and get it close. Or you could actually yeah, so if your floor plates are kind of complicated in that when they got cut through the mass, maybe they're curved kind of in a sort of a compound way when you look at it in plan, you can always edit. You can click on your floor plate at any time and click on edit boundary, and you may have to redraw that boundary based on using these tools. Because remember, they came directly from a mass, so there might be some little bit of complexity drawn into it. And if it's too complex, you may not be able to select kind of the edge of your floor assembly. So you may have to redraw some of these to get a railing onto it. I wouldn't redraw all of them unless you need to pick the lines and use a railing on that particular edge. So
what if we wanted to load this railing and recreate this project into a different project?
So if you've made a railing in class, or you found another model that someone worked on in your office, I do this all the time. I've got 2 projects back. I had 6 different railing designs for a project, and I know I'm doing another project and I want to copy in one of those designs. I don't want to have to redo this again. What you can do is let's go ahead and click on View, User Interface, and Recent Files, and go ahead and open up a new project. So it's a blank, kind of this new blank project that's involved. Now what I'm going to do is, while you have these 2 open, you can click on the Quick Access toolbar and the switch windows at the very top, and you can switch back into your project file. And you want to be in a floor plan view that has the same, I guess it really doesn't matter, but you want to be in like a floor plan view. If you have this railing drawn somewhere, select it. So I'm going to left click on it, copy it to the clipboard, and then when I go and switch my windows into project 2, the new project that I just opened, just click on Modify and Paste. And that brings this railing into the new project that now when I go to home and railing, I have it as an option to pick. So if you've made, you know, different railing designs in other project files, and this goes for any component that you've made in Revit that is not a family component, because remember the railing was developed by the railing tool that's in the project environment. So it's specific to that project. So if you ever want to bring in, let's say you created some stairs and you changed all the different profiles and everything like that, which we'll need to do in another class. But all of those stairs or whatever different parts that you've made, I could have that in another project and you can copy and paste it. You know, as long as you have both open, you can kind of load them into the projects that way. Last thing I want to go over, so that kind of gives you the, I think, a little more understanding of railings. So you can kind of start to see that you can develop any design that you really want, as long as you understand how to edit the baluster and look at it in section, and then where to position your railings. So anyone using Revit should never have any of these default railings that come with Revit because they are horrible. You've got that guardrail, that's the pipe rail, and then the vertical pickets, and then the handrails, and you know, all that stuff. You know, you might see that, you know, people using that, but if you're actually going to be designing a building, you're designing a building all the way down to their details. And so the last thing I always hate to see, even in real architecture, is you might have spent all this time on a design of your building, and then you throw in some handrail because you didn't spend the time to think about the details, and you see these vertical picket handrails everywhere, or guardrails, and you know, it has no relationship to the rest of the design. And so you really want to always customize your railings, and especially in studio, you know, where you're, or even in this class, when you're working on your different designs, you know, you want to come up with something that, you know, reflects your design ideas and how you want things to look in section, and how you want to, you know, react with a guardrail, because, you know, especially guardrails are something that you're always going to be touching as a person in that building, and so you really want those to be designed in a certain way that you can, you know, allow it to really reflect the architecture, and then also, you know, just the way that you want the building to feel, you know, as you kind of walk through it. So I would recommend for all your hotels, you'll have some kind of your own customized railing. And I'm going to show you in another class, because railings are a little bit complicated. I was going to show you another railing type well, on Thursday, that involves basically panels. Instead of just using you know, all these different tectonic structures, we can actually put in, you know, panel systems that are actually kind of nice as well. Now, towards the end here, I was going to show you a little bit about ceilings. Ceilings are very simple, very, very simple, so that's why I'm only going to spend about 5 minutes on them. And it doesn't matter what file we're in. I guess I'm in my project 2. I'm going to draw, since we're in this other project file, I'm going to draw a box. I drew a wall. It's just basic 8-inch generic wall, whatever came up first. Then I'm going to draw, so I've got kind of this room. Then I'm going to draw another wall that's, you know, whatever, something like this. Doesn't have to look exactly like it, but so I've got this room that's been enclosed, and I have this room that is actually kind of open air. So let's say there's probably, let's say, a floor plate down here. You know, let's complete it, I guess. I'll draw a floor. Let's say I have a floor plate, and I've got one enclosed wall or one enclosed room, and then I have this other room that has an open floor system, you know, kind of looking out, let's say, into an atrium or outside or whatever. And I want to be able to place a ceiling in these two spaces. If I click on Home and Ceiling, ceilings work just like floors and roof assemblies and even wall assemblies. You'll see that when I click on Ceiling, to the left under Properties, you have the option to select different types of ceilings. It already comes with a typical 2x2 ACT system. acoustical ceiling tile. If you look up, that's what's in this room. It's a 2x2 grid that has a ceiling tile that's put into it. You also have a 2-foot by 4-foot grid system. And then you have a gypboard on metal studs. Those are probably the most 3 common ceilings that you find in every building as you walk through campus. Just kind of look up and you'll see these different systems. Now, let's do the simple one, gypboard on metal studs. If I click on that, you'll see that by default, the automatic ceiling is shown highlighted at the top. If you don't see that, you need to click on your green bar up here, and you've got automatic ceiling. You also have a sketch-based ceiling. The difference is, if I use automatic ceiling, watch what happens to my cursor as I move into the enclosed room. The room highlights red, you can kind of see it up there, and I left click and nothing happens. I'm going to show you right now, this is the first mistake everybody makes in Revit when it comes to ceilings. You just drew a ceiling and it comes up with this error message and says none of the created elements are visible in this view. That's because we drew this as a ceiling that's going to be 8 feet above level 1, and we're in a floor plan view. You think to go into a floor plan and draw the ceiling, you need to be in the corresponding ceiling plan. And I'm also going to go back to my ceiling and make sure my gypsum wallboard layer has a stipple pattern on the surface pattern so that I can actually see that I placed something. I'll just gray this out real quick. We've gone over all this, I'm not going to harp on it. But when I click OK and edit out this and edit, I now got the stipple that shows me my gypboard ceiling. Now, I'm trying to do an automatic ceiling, and if I look at this in 3D, I've automatically placed a horizontal plane that represents the ceiling at 8 feet off of level 1. I could change it to 10 feet if I want to, and it's going to move up. If I look at it in section, so draw a section through, I can see my gypboard and metal stud assembly set at 10 feet above the floor. If I change this in section, let's say I decide this needs to be 12 feet up, it moves up there, and it also moves up, of course in 3D, it moves everywhere. So I can change the height of the ceiling by parameters off to the left, or even in section by just moving it up and down. The next part is I'm going to go back into the ceiling plan, level 1 ceiling, and I'm trying to place a new ceiling by automatic ceiling over into this other space that is not enclosed. And it's giving me my Ghostbuster sign, I can't do it. That's when we need to go into a sketch-based ceiling, meaning you now have to define the boundaries of the ceiling because it doesn't know where to go because this room's not enclosed. So then I can use my regular sketch tools that we've used many times, and I can do whatever I need to. And then I've got a ceiling. Again, I can move this up and down, do whatever. The last part I want to show you, excuse me, is the 2x2 system, or any kind of ceiling that might be something other than gypboard. Everyone kind of thinks that, well, we'll just put gypboard everywhere, and you'll never find a building that has gypboard all throughout the whole entire building. First of all, that's very expensive. Number two, you end up having to put in access panels all throughout the gypboard ceiling that looks really ugly, and you'll see that going down the office corridor. You'll see access panels everywhere because you have to get into the mechanical systems above. And so you'll see we'll have pockets of 2x2 ceiling or some kind of ceiling tile, and then maybe gypboard soffits around it. So what I might want to do is start looking at pattern patterns that define a ceiling system, and so maybe this enclosed room, and while I'm in this plan view, if I want to select the ceiling, if I tab through, I should be able to select my ceiling. Where'd my ceiling go? I need to look at unlimited. I changed my view depth to unlimited. It's looking at the level 2, and I moved it up to 12 feet. So it's actually above the level 2. I'm just going to change the view range real quick. Now I can tab over and eventually select my ceiling. And I could change this out to be a 2x2 grid system. So I've got my 2x2 grid. And if I decide that I don't want this grid aligned the way that it is, I can tab over or select one of the grids, and I can move it some distance, and it shifts the whole entire grid pattern to whatever I'd like, or I could rotate it. And that's basically all you need to know about ceilings. It's a horizontal plane that has some properties to it. If I edit the type, it works just like all of our other assemblies. So you've got your structure layer and the core boundary, and underneath is the finish of the ceiling. And so, you might put in whatever, thickness and different parts that you need, and it's all based on materials. So if I look at the render appearance of the 2x2 grid system, it's got a ceiling tile in there, as shown, and that's about it. Now I will say that if you export this model, let's say into Rhino, or you export this model outside of Revit into any other program, this 2x2 grid system that you see is just a hatch pattern. It's not a real 3D element. This is just a 2D surface that is shown. It works in Revit that we can actually see it in 3D, so I can remove this floor real quick, and I can look up in 3D and I see that hatch pattern, because hatch patterns and 2D elements show up in 3D views in Revit. But in other programs like Rhino, you all know that lines, 2D lines don't show up in 3D renderings or any other elements. So this would end up as a single plane if you were outside of Revit. And so next class I'm going to go over, if you want to make this into a 3D element, how you would model this ceiling so that you would actually just have kind of the T's. Let's say you've seen a lot of ceiling systems where you see the T's but the ceiling tiles removed. You see that a lot in restaurant design. If you ever want to see that, you're not going to be able to use this system, because right now the render appearance is going to be, when you render this, even though you just want to see the T's, you're going to see that tile because of the material pattern that's shown on it. So next class we'll go over some more ceiling, just making it into 3D and so on. But that's really the basics of ceilings, and you don't need to know too much more except for how to maybe slope them. And that will be the next, we'll cover that on Thursday. Go ahead and do some other work. No excitement for Thursday, but you guys need to keep working on your models. I just want to see an upload of progress. So add something into your model. Tell me you've worked on, a railing system or something, whatever. I'm going to kind of keep it a little basic right now.
Thursday is Critical Mass.
Is it?
Well, Bridget's going to be presenting. The guest lecturer is presenting.
Is it during this time? Oh shoot. Okay. I'll send out an email to you guys. We might have to see what we're going to do about that, because critical mass is pretty important, I think.
Well,
I'm glad you think so.
yeah, I'm glad. It's the guest lecturer.
Well, I presented in critical mass when I was here, so I think it's important.
Yeah.
They did it different this year. Instead of having the guest lecturer present Friday afternoon, like when everyone's already tired,
Yeah.
or having her present Thursday evening.
Okay.
So then the actual presentations will be on Friday.
Oh, so the guest lecture is presenting what time is the
6 to 7.
6 to 7?
Okay.
So,
Jeremy, I will not be here on Thursday. I'll be in Ann Arbor.
Okay.
you looking at there?
Yeah. Gotta make a decision.